Fantasy Flex here on the Action Network. Dane Martinez and Samantha Praviti. Let's turn our attention now, Samantha, to week 5. Okay, like Bill Belichick would say, we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to week 5 here. Let's look. We've had injuries. We've had quarterbacks getting demoted and benched. Speaking of quarterbacks, where are you going on the waiver wire if you're dealing with injury or just straight underperformance?
Sure. There are a couple ways you can go. I will say the whole waiver wire is pretty lean this week. And that stinks given how many injuries there are out there. But there's just like situations where there's not a good backup to the guy who was actually injured. But Kenny Pickett actually comes to mind. He was in my look ahead waiver column because I just had this sneaking suspicion that Mitch Trubisky was going to get himself benched. And he did. He was awful through the first 2 quarters. I mean, did next to nothing on offense and prompted them to hand over the reins to Pickett. I mean, the stat line doesn't tell the story because it shows 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions at least on the passing side. One of those was his first pass, and the other one was the last pass, which is on a Hail Mary. I don't know if that necessarily tells you that actually like Pickett really did inject life into this offense. They ended up losing the game, but they at least had a chance with Pickett there. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. Pickett actually did pick up 2 rushing touchdowns. Yeah. So certainly that is something to keep an eye on for fantasy because that gives you a really nice floor if he's just going to be running around a lot. Now the upcoming schedule, not great, at the Bills versus the Bucks and then at the Dolphins. So I think he's more of a longer term stash. If you have a guy that you're not sure about right now, like I have like Matt Stafford, who I'm not like excited to roll out there every week. And I might stash Kenny Pickett because he might end up being really fantasy viable. He's there in 95% of leagues. So he's probably someone that I think is the most exciting. We talked about Teddy Bridgewater. He's only 2% rostered, not a big surprise there. But certainly could be an inexpensive and widely available option with the Jets defense on tap. We know obviously the Dolphins have great weapons, so that should at least elevate his status a little bit. And like I said, he is one of the better backup quarterbacks. And then the other places I would look, maybe Ryan Tannehill, he's 17% rostered. Again, serviceable. We're not finding any guys that are going to be immediate like Lamar Jacksons here, but he was like, the QB 20 this past week, and he's out there. He's okay, and he's got the Commanders on deck. So like, if you need someone for this upcoming week, the Commanders defense looks terrible. So it's Ryan Tannehill might not be the worst option.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, when you brought up that Steelers upcoming schedule, it is not easy. The Bills on deck, the Bucks at deck, and at Miami, and we've seen how that has been tough for even some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Can I ask you about one other quarterback who, going into the season, kind of like I thought Atlanta was going to be laughable. There's another quarterback, another team I thought was going to be laughable, and he just keeps on getting it done. I'm talking about up in the Pacific Northwest, Samantha, Geno Smith and the Seattle offense. I saw them put up 40 some odd points. I see him statistically better than Russell Wilson in most categories so far. And I also believe that Seattle, despite what they've done, they're going to be in these kind of explosive games, sort of back and forth, maybe backdoor covers that do profile for quarterback getting production. We know he's got good wide receivers in Lockett and DK Metcalf. Do you believe in Geno Smith?
I sort of believe. Now, I will say, I think anyone playing this Lions defense is going to look pretty good, and vice versa. Anyone playing the Seahawks defense is going to look pretty good as well. So I don't know if I want to put too much stock in that scoregami game that happened, the only reason that I would really shy away from him next week is he does have the Saints on deck, who have looked pretty solid on defense. So I would not necessarily go to him for a streamer for this week. But I mean, if he actually turns out and looks good against the Saints, he's got definitely a number of exploitable matchups on deck. So I think that he's definitely a name to keep an eye on. And if you want to add him, I don't hate it at all.
All right, and what I'm saying is, in certain 2 quarterbacks leagues, you can do worse than Geno Smith as your super flex, So I know a lot of people kind of thought that he didn't belong as a starter, that he was just kind of keeping the seat warm for whoever Seattle would draft like number 1 overall next year. But he's actually performed well. He's outperformed his predecessor, Russell Wilson.